Welcome to another human read audiobook by the United Marxist Past Discord server. Link below in the description. In this series, we continue our investigation into the initial construction, the organizational structure, and the principles and tactics of the form of worker organization capable of seizing political power and establishing the revolutionary proletarian dictatorship and communality, which can in turn produce the communist mode of production through the shared class interests of the workers of the entire world. Our goal is to compile, analyze, and elaborate on what all the texts have to say about this, in the end have a strong understanding of the exact scientific process of this, particularly in general terms. At the end of our readings as a whole, we will try to put it all together and present it as a coherent whole in an educational video with associated notations. Today's reading will be the 1922 Third Communist International's First and Large Executive Committee, the report of the Communist Party of Italy on party tactics, and the question of the United Front. We have a pre-written textual analysis on the terms of the aforementioned topics, which is also posted in the pinned comment if you prefer to read it in text, or follow the link in the description to a read-only version of my Google Docs notes. This will summarize the contents of the text, but is no replacement for the actual reading itself for the sake of understanding the context. In addition, in the reading I supply my own commentary, critiques, additions, etc., which may be helpful for understanding some of these particularities. So, for our analysis, in this text, in terms of the construction, structure, principles, and tactics of the working class association, which can produce a revolutionary dictatorship of the proletariat, blah, all things said before. The writer discusses the conditions of the United Front and the tactics the party should take in regards to it. Ultimately, this text is about the need to maintain the independence of the party and how the party should engage with the masses as distinct from the masses' organizations. The party needs to always, at all times, engage and struggle on the ground floor, fighting in local partial interests alongside, but independent from worker organizations. At this time, it should propagandize in terms of the need for general struggle for proletarian interests for the communist cause, while also giving morale to all agitators. Its propaganda needs to be extended to the maximum extent in terms of its program and principles in all forms of places of agitation. At these struggles for immediate interests, the party will gain experience and influence over the masses and their organizations. These struggle programs and principles should be able to influence all stages of the struggle, both during the development of conditions and the final struggle without compromising the latter. The goal should at all times seek to avoid the masses being lulled to sleep through inaction. This also means avoiding constant infighting, as that makes action impossible. To this end, even though the party fights alongside the masses on the ground with their organization for the partial immediate interests, while not compromising the goal of the final struggle or its principles, it maintains independence from those organizations, clearly on all levels, organizational, personally, programmatically, in propaganda, and so on. It does not, of its own accord, reach out to other organizations for coalition. But if it is approached, it will enter the fray of the United Front with demands that remain principled, attempting to force the worker organizations to give up their reformist and opportunist goals through conditional support. It will demand that other organizations accept their program and requirements before entering into a coalition, and it will retain independence. These conditions involve the rejection of sectarianism and demand that there be no propaganda or action that will keep the proletariat from direct and armed action at any point. The liquidationists must be liquidated. If this condition is broken, then the party will leave the United Front and support a general strike led by the United Front. This is so that it's clear that it has the internal independence from all other organizations, and that is separate from others in terms of its tactics and engagement with the proletariat. When the Social Democrats ultimately fail, the proletariat needs to be able to see the victorious party as its own force. Through our requirements, our political action can disrupt the opportunist elements and win influence over worker organizations. This requires the strictest of discipline and principles, the most suitable people within the party organization. These suitable people are serious, Have good conscience. Do not see the party as an empowering position or as an entrance into parliament. Seek positions of responsibility and are willing to take risks. That's what makes a good communist. And we will now begin the full audiobook reading. I hope you all enjoy the session and will attend next time as well. And this is United Marxist Pact with another recording. As usual, I don't have any structured or good opening, so we're just going to get straight into it. We just completed the thesis on tactics and theses on the agrarian question for the 1922 Communist Party of Italy Second Congress, Theses of Rome. Now this is the 1922 Third Communist International First Enlarged Executive Committee report of Communist Party on Italy on party tactics and the question of the United Front. Now we had talked about the United Front elsewhere. Let's see what it has to say here. 1. History of party tactics to the present day. The PCDI, which came into being at a very difficult time, had to devote most of its attention to the work of internal organization. During this period, while working and spreading propaganda in all fields, it carried out a tactic of independent action to conquer its own party positions against all other parties. From the beginning, however, the party's tactical conceptions had nothing to do with the completely fictional voluntarist and pushist tendencies which have been sometimes attributed to it. Conscious of being a minority party, the PCDI never believed that it could, together with the forces directly under its umbrella, prepare a coup d'etat for the revolutionary conquest of power. It is not because of this illusion, but because of the very necessity of the party's existence and its penetration among the masses, that the PCDI had formed a military corps and has conducted and continues to conduct guerrilla action against the bourgeois forces. The tactics of the PCDI have been completely Marxist, and their development is completely in accordance with the resolutions of the Third Congress, which are not a rectification of the tactics of the PCDI, but represent the true experience of proletarian struggles possessed by the Marxist communist movement in both in Italy and abroad, which is quite distinct from the romantic revolutionism of certain other radical groups. Proof of this is the contrast between our party and the Italian syndicalists, who later became fascists, by the way, and anarchists. Our party immediately understood that a condition for the realization of its revolutionary program was a, quote, conquest of the great masses. By constituting in Livorno the true Communist Party and organizing it on a solid basis, only one of the revolutionary conditions was assured. It was necessary to realize the other, to structure around this party the great mass of the proletariat, around its most combative strata. By the way, if we reject the formula of the, quote, majority of the proletariat to be conquered, and if we are concerned with that the reactive role of the organized minority vanguard should not be devalued, we do not believe that with this we clarify, without denying its spirit, the scope of the Marxist tactics decided by the Third Congress. The proof of this proper tactical orientation of the party lies in the fact that from the very first moment it has undertaken a very intense trade union work, in which the constant intervention in all questions, even contingent ones, which interest the workers, is accompanied by clear revolutionary directives which inspire all the work. The entire party, far from having, quote, KPD type, end quote, tendencies towards splits in the trade union movement. Reminder in the previous text, the Gorder's letter to Lenin, the criticism of remaining and working alongside trade unions instead of demanding that they turn themselves into industrial unions. So essentially, this is taking the side of the Third International, which Gorder had declared to be anti-Marxist and opportunist in character when it came to the trade unions. Tendencies towards split into trade union movements has made its own slogan of unity of the entire Italian proletariat in one single trade union united front of action. But the problem of reaching the masses, still controlled by the socialists and anarchists with our propaganda, presented itself to us at once, was practically solved even before we possessed the data of the Third Congress and the Congress of the Red Unions. The study of the Italian situation dictated to us our tactical plan. But far from falling it unconsciously, as Comrade Zinoviev wrongly assumes in one of his writings, it was we who drew it up and launched it upon the masses, naturally taking into account their dispositions and tendencies. The formal proposal, given in August 1921 of the Communist Trade Union Committee to the big trade union organizations for a general action against the bosses' offensive, conceived as a national strike of all categories led by a coalition of all the trade unions. The story of the reception of our proposal can be summed up in a few words: relentless obstructionism on the part of the trade union leaders, increasing sympathy for our position on the behalf of the masses. With this proposal, we became the initiators of the United Proletarian Front. At the same time, we did not interrupt this, but intensified our work to get our members out of the socialists and anarchists and into our own ranks. Another basic aspect of the campaign was this: sometimes we are defeated at the voting trade union meetings and congresses where the officials themselves are delegates without consulting the masses. But our proposal almost always triumphs when it is at large workers' rallies, and especially at meetings that are called during partial agitations. The essence of the Communist proposal has been fully understood by the masses. They are now convinced that there is no hope of success against the bourgeois offensive through partial actions on the behalf of separate groups, and that it's necessary to unite all the struggles that the bourgeois offensive, with its multiple forms, forces the proletariat to fight into a single struggle of all member groups in the interests of all. Because if the proletarian defeat continues, no one will be spared. However, this conviction is built precisely through partial struggles. Communists have always participated in them to take a direct part in the struggle and, at the same time, to lead the masses to force civic leaders into general action. Thus, even when partial struggles, as has almost always been the case, have not led to success, our influence has increased. These partial struggles, on the other hand, which have been going on for 6 or 7 months, are raising the morale of the proletariat simply because of the very existence of a real class movement. The workers are responding to the call to strike, and also to fight in guerrilla warfare against bourgeois forces. They understand that if these efforts fail, it's because of tactics used by the defeatist leaders. Going to take that paragraph I struggled mightily to actually get out. I need to get better at speaking, I guess. So we should be engaging within the trade unions in support of local movements, not just general ones. The party needs to show themselves to demonstrate the class movement. And by fighting in these local movements, it acts as propaganda, shows the necessity of future general action, and gives morale. Back to the text. Examples of this general situation were seen in general strikes in cities and regions: Trieste, Genoa, Rome, Turin, Naples, etc., and in national strikes by category: printers, dock workers, etc. The great masses that are active in struggle have made our general word of action their own. The development of this campaign led to the formation of the Alliance of Labor, composed of the major national unions. The initiative for this was taken in February by the Railway Workers' Union, which before calling in on the unions wanted to call the parties for the sole purpose of informing them of the proposed union alliance. We refused to go to this meeting. The reason is simple and solid. Our intervention would have led to an irredeemable contrast of opinions, without concessions of principle on any substance on our part. The Alliance of Labor would not have come into being, thus losing the platform we sought for the best contact with the broad masses. In fact, we could not have signed the equivocal and pacifist communique that came out of the meeting of the parties. We limited ourselves to sending the railway workers a letter saying that we were the initiators of the Union Alliance and they could count on the discipline of the communists. This is an interesting set of tactics. I don't disagree with this. I think that they had the right idea here. They supported it, but they couldn't actually indicate support because it would go against their principles. So in truth, they're going against their principles, but they don't want to be public about it. Anyway, and there are good reasons for that in this case because they wanted it to actually emerge into a thing. On the other hand, one might argue, um, hey, listen, if it wasn't according to communist principles, then you should just keep on pressing, and if it doesn't emerge, then just keep on pressing. This is a questionable state of affairs. I won't take a strict side. I think that's very much, well, anyway. The initiative of the railway workers coincided with the ministerial crisis between the Bonomi and Facta cabinets. It was clear that the socialists then wanted to form a proletarian bloc in order to use to push it for a, quote, leftist ministry. The independent position of the party was intended to allow us to fight against this plan, also attacking the Alliance of Labor if it deviated from its goals, without, however, breaking its structure and discipline as a coalition of mass organizations. The plan for the better government of Italy is carried out as nothing but defeatist propaganda among the masses, because it's presented as a means of eliminating fascism and reaction, inviting the proletariat to give up its active resistance in favor of leaving it to parliament. Therefore, even if we consider it useful that this step is really taken, above all to dissolve the last illusions of the proletariat about parliamentary means, and thus liquidate the influence of the Social Democrats. The tactic that is needed is our independence of action and constant opposition to this plan. On the other hand, the Constitution of the Alliance of Labor was a concession made by the rightists to the spirit of unity of action that had won the broad masses, a concession that had been made by the right wing precisely to lessen the pressure exerted by the masses, to delay the moment where the latter would impose action. We had to fight the danger of the alliance putting the masses to sleep through inaction. Therefore, in the United Front, we didn't need a position of mutual compromise linking our action to a common formula, but rather absolute freedom of action and propaganda without being threatened with a split every single day. So this is the source of their reasoning for doing that thing where they're basically saying, okay, yeah, we support it, but at the same time we don't support it. They're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place. They're like, okay, we don't want to do a split, but at the same time, this thing is a concession to the right. So, the Communist Party needs to avoid the masses being lulled to sleep through inaction. Even a worse position is better than constant infighting, which makes action impossible. Therefore, a concession to the rights in the labor movement may be necessary to keep the fight going. Oh, concession that, yeah. Wait, am I reading this right? On the other hand, the Constitution of American Alliance of Labor was a concession made by the rightists to spirit of unity action that had won the proud masses. A concession that had been made by the right wing precisely to lessen the pressure exerted by the masses and delay the moment where the latter would impose action. We had to fight the danger of the alliance putting the masses to sleep through inaction. For the United Front, we didn't need a position of mutual compromise linking our action to a common formula, but rather absolute freedom. So, no, this is incorrect. So, I think I need to read the next paragraph. Okay, so the immediacy of the problem of constant splits leading to inaction required them to support the United Front, which is also a plot to lull the working class asleep. Okay. I think that's what it's saying. Having forced the socialists and anarchists to take the irrevocable step for the trade union alliance, which is expressed in calls for committees and mass rallies, we established propaganda directives in a systematic way, tending to stir up the real content of action which, according to the communists, must be given to the alliance. In a March Manifesto, we summarize its foundations. For its goals, we presented a series of concrete demands against the economic and political manifestations of the boss's offensives, including, right in the first paragraphs, what the socialists didn't accept: rejection of wage reductions. For the means, we called for a national general strike. For the organization of the alliance, we demanded that it be enlarged on the basis of direct representation of the masses, with broad local committees in which all unions are represented, and the convening of a national congress of the Alliance of Labor. The present National Committee, we then demanded, also directly, through the Communist Trade Union Committee, that the delegations to each national trade union body should not be composed only of central officials, but also be appointed on a basis proportional to the fractions into which each trade union is divided. If the proposal were accepted, the communist minority of the communist minority of the Railway Workers Union, the pro-Moscow syndicalist minority of the trade union would enter the said committee. The consequences would be that there could be a majority against the socialists in the Alliance of Labor, composed of communists, syndicalists, and anarchists. The rejection of this proposal allowed us to campaign against the sectarianism of others and their work, which has a ruinous effect on the unity of the proletariat. Reminder, sectarianism in this case means the denial of the ability to propagandize in each other's organizations, among other things. A position such as one we demanded would, however, leave complete freedom of action to the political center of the party, while allowing it to direct closely and with absolute certainty of execution the work of the small communist group in the Alliance Committee. The same result is being achieved in the local committees, which have been accepted, will be achieved more and more as the alliance base is extended to the broad masses. The Social Democrats were rejected in this position, recognizing the impotence of the mere isolated actions of the isolated unions. But since the masses irresistibly demanded a real solution, they respond that the way out lies in political struggle. Through political action, they say openly that parliamentary collaboration of the proletariat with the bourgeoisie must be understood. This is not a vague expression, but a concrete solution, and is conceived in no other way besides the government supported through parliament by socialists, populists, and bourgeois left Democrats. Nitty de Nicola. To use the political strength of the proletariat in a ministerial crisis, this is the aim of the reformists. They oppose the discipline of the majority of the Socialist Party, which is maximalist. But the latter is an impasse, being unable to counter the formula of the reformists with even a single word of independent action, contradicting everything that's heard in their propaganda, appealing to the direct struggle of the masses against reaction, and is thus only capable of sterile and negative intransigence. The reformists put forward the collaborationist solution mainly because they would lose the popularity of the masses if they did not propose a solution. They desperately avoid general proletarian action. They do not want to lose contact with the masses, and would even follow them up to the point of a national general strike in order to prepare, as always, for its failure, and to lead the weakened proletariat back into collaborationist methods. In this game, which has tragic precedents in Italy, the reformists make use of the complicity of the revolutionary demagogy of the maximalists, and also cleverly speculate on the naive revolutionism of the syndicalists, anarchists, and many other colorful, subversive elements in Italian politics. Thus, the formula of the reformists is passage to political action. A political coalition of proletarian forces would be useful to them, if it were formed without first clearly establishing its limits and objectives. From this coalition would emerge a movement of the Italian masses as a whole, which would be driven towards two outcomes: either the ministerial solution we have mentioned, or the collapse of the coalition when its actions become unstoppable, breaking apart the proletarian coalition, leading to a skillful reversal of responsibility, blaming it on the extremist elements through sleight of hand. So Lemonades asks, who are they calling reformists? The answer is basically anybody who is calling for this passage to political action. in terms of uh, in terms of this stuff here. And the thing is, right, they're talking about the concept of a united front and its applicability. United front with anarchists, with populists, with bourgeois leftist Democrats, with reformists, with syndicalists, and so on and so forth. Whether or not we should align with them against fascism and the far right, the bourgeois offensive. Okay. Continuing. Recently, this game was revealed in the proposal for a secret party conference made by the Alliance of Labor, after the ultra-reformist representatives of the CGL agree with the others on the inevitability of the general strike. They said, however, that such a strike, quote, can only be insurrectionary and tend towards a political crisis of the regime, end quote. Hence the intervention of the political parties. This would lead either to a coalition controlled by the reformists or to the failure of the agreement because of the refusal of the communists, in which case they would have good reason to counteract our general action campaign by saying we had made it impossible. How we have behaved in this phase of the struggle is evident from the documents attached here. We intervened in the meeting. We stated that we could reach a political coalition, but under precise conditions. These conditions are such that accepting them would amount to, were the socialists and the CGL to see the failure of their whole plans to divert the movement. And if they reject it, it gives us good opportunity to demonstrate to the masses the correctness of the conditions we have laid down, which are equivalent to protecting the proletariat from betrayals and terrible disappointments like those that are still very vivid in their memory. Okay. Um, so All right. So the Communist Party enters the fray with a demand that remains principled, trying to force them to give up their goals through conditional support. This protects the party and the masses. Back to text. This attitude of ours has been purely tactical. In reality, we are in favor of the trade union general strike, from which a political struggle develops, which is in fact an episode of it, but with a much longer process, and in which our work of replacing with our influence out of the socialists and anarchists must be inserted if success is to be possible. We are against any chance of a coalition of parties leading insurrectionary activity, the revolutionary movement of the masses, of which the others speak only in either bad faith or thoughtlessly and with general terrible lack of preparation. However, our tactics have put the others in a very awkward position. So far, they have neither accepted nor rejected our proposals. They cannot accept them and are afraid to compromise by rejecting them, since they use against the impulse to fight the demagogic argument that can only mean, quote, the revolution. Given this situation, we cannot think of an intermediate solution between the open bourgeois collaboration that the reformists are preparing and our proposal for direct action by the masses. The fact alone that the equivocal elements of the workers' movement are talking about the overthrow of the regime shows that there is nothing left to talk about. Recognizing that it's so absurd to think of throwing out the cry for the conquest of the dictatorship of the Communist Party leading from the masses, there is no other platform for agitation and action than our proposal for general action led by the unions. The riots have no argument to counter it before the masses, and its acceptance would mark a sure step on the road for the Communist Party's conquest of the masses. It must be kept in mind that in this campaign we are constantly accompanied by the other forces, pro-Moscow, Vichy fraction, syndicalists of the USI, and the socialists of the Lazari, Mafi, and Riboldi fraction. Since we have no political commitment to them as a party, collaboration with them is useful to us because we are the ones who are consistently control them. With the other elements, the dangers are very obvious. We would let them be valued as friends for the unity of the front in the proletarian struggle, and then the very thing would be destroyed by them, and the defeat would be resolved by shifting the responsibility onto the communists, claiming that their content had been too extreme and radical for a coalition. This is how the situation stands in the present moment. So far they're talking about the pros and cons of a unified front, and they're essentially saying, hey, look, utilize any of these if the masses are demanding it, get involved, if only to talk about what's going to be happening and educate. Um, but ultimately, if you actually throw yourself into it, then you're going to get fucked over. Because it's not going to work, and the communists are going to be left holding the bag. 2. Developments and prospects of the Communist Party of Italy's tactics. We aren't here to develop the arguments used by the PCDI to criticize the tactics of the United Front in ways in which we were approved by the large executive committee of the International, to develop the general and international question. We will limit ourselves to a few considerations that explain and defend the action carried out by the PCDI and respond to the practical objections that have been made to them. The spirit of the tactics of the United Front is the conquest of the masses carried out by using the circumstances produced by the bourgeois offensive, by putting ourselves in contact with the part of the proletariat which follows other political parties. It's a matter of creating a platform of agitation that extends further than anything done through the simple propaganda of our program and the political principles. It's a matter of, undoubtedly, influencing the real developments of the situation even in the phases that will have to precede the final struggle for the conquest of power by the proletariat, without any way renouncing the preparation of the conditions for the success of this final struggle, in which the Communist Party will have to be the protagonist. The essential basis for a conquest of the great masses is the understanding that propaganda and revolutionary preparation can only be carried out on the terrain of the struggles that the proletariat wages for its immediate interests, from which it draws the necessary experience for its further task. That this is perfectly understood by our party is shown by its extremely intense activity in the trade unions and the economic struggles of the Italian proletariat. That poses in a concrete way the question of the passage from individual economic struggles to their union in a common action of the whole proletarian mass without distinction of category or locality, which is the Marxist process through which every economic struggle reveals its political content, is shown by the campaign for the proposal of general proletarian action, based on the immediate interests of the masses and used for the diffusion and extension of the circle of influence of our party. This campaign has allowed us to get in touch with that very part of the proletariat which is controlled by the other political parties, and to gain against said parties a series of positions, showing to the eyes of every single proletarian that they are enemies not only of the communist revolution, but also to the struggle for the concrete and the obvious interests of the masses. I'm not going to summarize this now, because we're getting low on time. But we'll put together the recordings later. In order to achieve this result, which today has taken shape in the Alliance of Labor, a body whose task is to gather the great working masses and put them into motion, and as many local actions and the May Day demonstrations have shown, our party has not made any renunciation. It has not had to soften its criticism and its polemics towards the others, and it has not made any commitment whatsoever, nor signed any common declaration containing an intermediate and ambiguous line between our principles and those of other parties. In the meetings of the Alliance, we bring our principles, which do not contain the theoretical theses of the Communist doctrine or the political party program, but have been prepared by us without any consideration that could attenuate them. Many, many times these resolutions, accepted by the broad masses, especially during their agitations, are verbatim reproduced in the press of other parties, because they are the official resolutions of the Alliance. At the same time, not only have we not have to give up our work conquering the trade unions, but we support it daily through our campaign for the United Proletarian Front, the Social Democrats being obliged to abandon their positions in the trade unions when, before the masses, their opposition to their proposals for common activity remain in the minority. Thus our network of union infiltration and framing is extended, on which the influence of our party rests, and which increasingly adheres to all branches of the union movement and also to the forms of worker organizations, cooperatives, etc. On the day when the central branch of the trade union alliance, in the course of a movement, was about to betray the proletarian cause, and the party judged it possible to push the struggle to the extreme, it could have taken over the leadership by means of a coup d'etat on the trade union's central branches through its trade union organization, closely disciplined by the party. If, on the other hand, decisive action directed by a Communist Party alone is not possible, the movement will be stopped by its leaders while it could still develop, or will be sabotaged and betrayed. The Communist Party will be able to place all of its responsibility on them, turning this fact into a point of support for the extension of its influence and the preparation of other struggles. In other words, they're saying because they made the demands that they have in the way they have remained non-sectarian and therefore have not embroiled the Communist Party in a shitty situation. They have successfully threaded the needle in such a way that they can enter into this alliance while not entering into this alliance and end up propagandizing to the workers. The experience of the circumstances in which the Italian proletariat has been betrayed and sabotaged in its movements, which are conducted on a unitary basis, shows how necessary it is for the true revolutionaries to appear before the masses in a constant position of independence from the politics of the opportunists. For up to now, as the communists were united with the Socialist Party and the syndicalists and anarchists are so willing to accept responsibility for common movements within the Socialist Party and the Reformist Confederation, the work of these right-wing elements has led the movement to failure through compromises with the bourgeoisie. And afterwards, the great demoralized proletarian mass turned away from the left-wing elements, believing them to be responsible for the defeat. What we are saying about the anarchists serves to show that to avoid such a trap, it is not enough to have the independence of the party's organization, but it is also necessary to have its independence from common responsibilities in leading the struggle. On one hand, it is necessary to take part in the struggle and to be in the front line among those who stir it up and promote the deployment of all proletarian forces. This practical problem seems to us to be solved by our tactics in the best possible way given the Italian situation. On the other hand, before the masses, the party will not say coldly that it cannot share the responsibility of directing an action together with the socialists, because such an argument is not understandable to the masses who follow the socialists, but will set such a condition for common action that the working masses themselves will consider them just, turning against the Social Democrats as they do not have a political platform and organization capable of accepting them, i.e., capable of putting themselves in the terrain of struggle in defense of the working class. As far as the concrete situation and the development of social relations in the political regime of Italy are concerned, we have already mentioned that that two proposals are being put forward to the masses today. That of the reformists, who propose collaboration with the left of the bourgeoisie as a means to ease up the fascist and reactionary offensive, and that of the communists, who propose general action for direct struggle, understanding this is as a platform to stop the arrogance of the bourgeois offensive, intensify further revolutionary preparation towards struggles in which the Communist Party will have a more prominent part. The Italian communists stand clearly on this ground, that is useful for the policy of collaboration of socialists to be fully carried out. The proletariat will thus be able to see that this solution is illusory, will abandon the social democratic and social reformist illusions much more rapidly than anything our propaganda alone could cause. But is it not advisable, in order to obtain this result and to make reformist socialists take responsibility for their failures, to set a watchword concerning the form of government, which is intermediate between that of bourgeois collaboration and that of proletarian power on the basis of dictatorship? We do not have any consideration of principle. We will only note that the game of reformist betrayal in Italy is only possible thanks to the complicity of the maximalists, pseudo-revolutionism of the Sarantians, and the naivety of the pay-bourgeois revolutionism of the anarchists and many other dubious movements, each of which has been ready-made formulas for a change of the political regime. Speculating on all this, the reformers let the hypnotization of the masses unfold, with all the revolutionary phraseology behind which they weave their plot of pure and simple dedication to bourgeois rule. We must not forget, I'm reminded of Obama's change, right? We must not forget the reformists themselves have proposed, are proposing, and will propose watchwords for a change of political regime, In 1919, the Union Constituent Assembly and the Modigliani Republic. Today, we have steps towards D'Annunzio and the proposal we have talked about in, of the insurrectional strike voted by Alliance of Labor, etc. In this situation, the task of the Communist Party is to work for the union of all proletarian forces, but at the same time for the destruction of political confusion. If we were to propose a formula of workers' government apart from the fact that it is difficult to understand what these two words even mean, the left-wing socialists and anarchists would suffocate us under their demagogy for revolution without adjectives and ultra-revolution. In order to react to the defeatism of this demagogy, there is only the formulation of programs of struggle which to the masses appear completely concrete and realizable in the actual present situation. The proposal of the reforms is how it is because it's possible in parliamentary practice, given the present composition of the chamber. That of the communists is just as practical as concrete. Since the Serratian maximalists do not and cannot have a positive formula, being very intransigent in word and being pacifists and enemies of struggle indeed, it is necessary to get out of the above dilemma in order to crush all misunderstandings and polarize the attention of the proletariat on the clear terms of the question. Then there is the problem of the struggle against fascism. The reform's proposal for collaboration is based entirely on propaganda among the masses against the principle of direct and armed resistance, in order to give them the illusion that there are peaceful and legal means of eradicating fascism. Now, the left-wing socialists are not for collaboration, in words, but they are effectively collaborators with their submission, as they too make propaganda for passivity, non-resistance, and the temperation of pacifism. Only by advocating the necessity of the armed action of the proletariat against fascism and reaction can one stand against a collaborationist campaign. This word is intensely popular, since proletarian indignation against the fascists grows every day. It's just a matter of organizing it. A word of order which gives the masses a glimpse at the possibility of power owned by any other means besides arms would only favor the shared game of reformists and the maximalists, in a certain sense the negative work of the anarchists, who propagandize against an organization of the proletarian armed forces intended to constitute a class-based political power against, quote, red militarism. Isn't that frickin' familiar? The word of workers' government is therefore ruled out of the situation due to a variety of concrete reasons, which shows that not only would it not serve to polarize us among wider masses, but compromise the results obtained so far and the position that the Communist Party has already obtained, which would appear as the first supporter of that united direct action, which is deeply desired by the masses, is made difficult by the influence of all sorts of opportunists. We would like now to argue against the many objections raised, not always with the knowledge of the facts against our party and its tactics. But what we have set forth is a sufficient answer, and it is worthwhile to take down two strange and contradictory criticisms. The first, our party is a party devoted to theoretical speculation and not to practical action. The second, that is concerned with union work and not with political work. The union struggles and problems in Italy today are above all extremely political. And when we propose formulas for organization and unity in the union field, it is not in order to put aside our own political goals, but in order to approach them with the spirit of tactic of the United Front, that is, by making our policy come to life against that of the other parties and groups, after having led them to place their forces on common ground with ours. Against this series of concrete reasons, which coincide with the theoretical development of our tactical theses, which now isn't the time to discuss, there's really only sort of an a priori reasoning that sees formal contradiction between the two practices of the United Front and the United Political Front. Would it be a contradiction for the Italian party and for all the others do not have made a split into trade unions just as they had in the political field, to be for the organizational unity of the trade unions yet against political organizational unity? These arguments deserve no more than a few lines to be properly cleared away from the field of discussion. Leonardes asks, was this written before the fascist coup of Italy? If so, did the Communist Party actually take arms against them? The answer is yes. This was written before it. Gramsci fucked things up and took the legions away from Bordiga for one thing. For another thing, there was mismanagement of tactics. The fascist unions, the fascist syndicalist unions, left the cities in order to attack the communist rural unions, and they failed to actually properly defend against it. And when Mussolini marched into Rome, in a triumph format, the bourgeoisie peacefully surrendered to him everything. Um, exactly as planned, of course. There's a lot more to be said here, and I believe we have a piece later in here about, yes, the Communist Party of Italy report on fascism. That's coming up pretty soon here. And then a later report on fascism by the left of the Communist Party of Italy. I believe that this is after the seizure of power. I might be wrong, though. When did Mussolini come to power? 1922. Yeah. So it's these two will answer the question in greater detail. Continuing. We believe that communists make political action not by valuing the parties, but by valuing their party, which came into being precisely because only its directives can provide the basis for class-based policy. Displacing the forces of the other parties and trying to influence their game is a tactical task of the Communist Party and its policy, but no one can conclude from this that as political action to make a compromise of the socialists, for example, and apolitical action to attack them on a daily basis and put them before a proposal for united trade union action in order to extend our political influence over the unions by crushing theirs. Oops. It is clear from what we have said that we have no sentimental scruples about approaching the socialists or other political leaders and sitting down with them at the same table, something we have done and will do again when the need arises. And not only when they represent the unions, but also sometimes when they represent the party. We pose a problem on quite different grounds than is given by these trivialities, as can be seen from the foregoing. In its difficult task, the PCDI has gone through it and goes through far more difficult situations. Our comrades are at work even in the Catholic and fascist organizations. We believe that the objections that have been circulated about our tactics expend exclusively on ignorance of the question, something for which we do not accuse comrades in other countries, and for which to a certain extent we are ourselves responsible. Discussions and direct exchange of ideas can only clarify the situation and rectify the evaluation of the directives followed by our party, all in accordance with the animating spirit of our common doctrine and organization. 3. The Congress and relations between the PCDI and the Comintern. The theses prepared for the National Congress of our party were approved by the consensus of all comrades. If the discussion were dispassionate, it is because the PCDI is dedicated to work and action and not to speculation and internal polemics. The strict discipline that prevails in it has accustomed the mass of comrades to trust in the tactical leadership of the leaders. The Central did nothing to restrict neither the discussion nor the knowledge on the part of the party of all the material relating to the position taken by the International in the question of the United Front. When the decisions of the enlarged executive committee were known to us, taken against the vote of our delegation and against the resolution put forward by and inspired by our tactical theses, the party organizations had already voted for the Central Committee's theses. A certain opposition was formed at the Congress. This opposition arose not because the ideas of the Communist International on the United Front persuaded some comrades who came to learn about them, but only because these comrades, with all due honorable exceptions, found in this situation the courage to engage in a polemic against the dictatorial executive. The opposition came to meet with a dubious campaign of disruption of the party carried out by the notorious Ambrosini, who, thanks to the conscience of the comrades and the energy of the Central, did not suffer any repercussions. In the opposition, there were some who, not having yet the preparation necessary to Communist Party militancy, and having preserved the old spirit of politicianism of the PSI, I don't know what that stands for, Party of Socialist International, perhaps, wanted to vent their desire to have more authority and influence in the party. This opposition did not know how to build its own respectable platform for discussion, apart from the sensible statements of Comrade Tasca and Graziadi, and the attempts of Presutti, who were nonetheless inadequate. The opposition began to work in the corridors, spreading equivocal and defeatist rumors and misusing the name of the International with inaccuracy and lies. The prevalence of these methods would have prepared the degeneration of our party, and we judged it necessary to crush the opponents in an open and total discussion. There were therefore also didactic and party training motives in our conduct. As for the disciplinary question, we consider it satisfactorily resolved by the formula of the motion passed before discussing the theses accepted by the delegates of the executive committee, and not contradicting any official requests of the International of which we had knowledge. Any misunderstandings that may have arisen in this regard are clarified in the letter from Radic and the letter from Terracini to the Presidium. The opposition, after a unanimous vote on the motion, instead of polemicizing the merits of our theses, tried again to, quote, circumvent them by re-proposing the disciplinary and procedural issue that had been overcome in a preliminary way, and speculating on the already given opinion by the International, with the sole purpose of moving votes and creating uncertainty among the delegates. We have already said that in the face of these manifestations of vulgar parliamentarism, it was necessary to proceed vigorously, and it was necessary for us to be intransigent and demand a vote on the tactical theses without reservations, but not out of intransigence towards the International, its opinion, and the discipline that we must maintain, but rather to break the snares of the opportunism without debasing ourselves to the level of fishing for the votes of the undecided by softening our position, as is done by the sort of tactical opportunism that we consider harmful within the party. Okay, we're going to take this right here. Okay. After the vote, the most authoritative comrades in the majority agreed on the composition of the new Central. They did not want to make a central tendency, but they wanted to exclude elements that had proven to be either incapable or disloyal. The fact that the majority did not want to make a question out of the tendencies or circles is demonstrated by the criteria actually adopted. A comrade who in Livorno was on the right wing of the party remained in the Central Committee. Some comrades of the left, who had given or could give little activity, while being among the most sympathetic towards the point of view of the executive committee, were excluded. Of the new members, serious men of political faith, of proven faith, were chosen, and among them some who clearly sympathized with the thesis of the International were included. They did not follow a political criterion, but we would say a moral criterion. The real world is a technical criterion. We look for the most suitable ones, excluding those who, due to lack of seriousness and/or conscience, still conceive the party as a pedestal for personal proclamation, or as a breeding ground for gossip and conspiracies in the parliamentary corridor, and also those who, despite having useful talents, shy away from positions of responsibility. We chose the most able and willing men for our work, for whom the communist militia is not a sport or an aesthetic position, and who are not afraid of the risks. Okay, so this is what is considered suitable. So, in order to combat vulgar parliamentarism, the party must demand adherence to tactical theses without reservation. The internationalist position must be maintained along with discipline, and the party should aim solely at avoiding losing independence. Um, and in terms of people that the party seeks, it's serious people with good conscience who don't see the party as an empowering position or as entrance into parliament, who are seeking actively positions of responsibility that fit their talents and are willing to take risks. Back to the text. Part 4. Concrete proposals made by the Executive Committee of the PCDI to the Comintern. 1. The PCDI will not take the initiative for meeting with the other political parties. 2. The PCDI will continue to carry out within the bosom of the Alliance of Labor its present program, with the prospect that may find consensus among syndicalists and anarchists, putting the socialists in the minority of the Alliance of Labor. In other words, they will continue their independent positions, and at times those positions might also be echoed by the anarchists and syndicalists, and as such, the socialists will be crowded out. Not at all times, but they might come to common agreement on tactics in terms of, for example, hey, we need to put the workers first. Whereas the liberal opportunist uh, socialists, uh, who the liberal opposition opportunist socialists would be against that, and because the Alliance of Labor, the United Front, is more filled with people who are in support of the workers. Um, by and large, the Communist Party should win out. Sorry, I struggled mightily to put that out there. 3. The PCDI, apart from its opinions on the World Workers' Congress, will officially propose that the Italian Alliance of Labor participate in a campaign for its convocation. In this campaign, the PCDI has the right to present the World Congress as a contingent meeting for agreement on action, but not as the basis of a single world proletarian organization, nor is the necessary premise for the emergence in all countries of a coalition of proletarian parties. 4. Upon receiving invitations from the PSI and other proletarian organs to conferences in which the other political parties participate, the PCDI will participate. The PCI will set as a condition for an agreement a series of points, such as to exclude from others the possibility of propaganda and action which would divert the proletariat from direct and armed action and from an outlet of its struggles, in case of victory, into proletarian power. See the conditions presented at Rome Conference. The conditions are prejudicial, and we had read that before. The conditions are prejudicial to the agreement and are not to be modified in order to make the agreement itself possible. In the event of a breakup, the PCDI will always declare itself without conditions in favor of a national general strike led by the Alliance of Labor and will continue its campaign to that end. 5. Any coalition or agreement with the PSI in the electoral, parliamentary, or governmental field is absolutely excluded. So we're going to take this. And then we're going to take this and this. Actually, and so no initiative for meeting with other political parties. Within the United Front, the party will set conditions which maintain the power of the proletariat to actually take to revolutionary action. If this demand is broken, then the party will leave the United Front and then support a general strike led by the United Front. But outside of it. And then finally, but then organized within the general strike, but independently. Any coalition or agreement into PSI in the electoral, parliamentary, or governmental field is absolutely excluded. And that is the text of the report of the Communist Party of Italy, species and tactic, or excuse me, on party tactics and the question of the United Front. Thanks for listening.